Hi.
Hi.
Okay, so let me open up your midterm here, and so let me share the screen and go here, and okay, so there you can see the paper, and okay, so any claim you make, I state in the paper, right? Let me say this again
Yes.
with more changes, and then I'll send them to you again. But any changes that any claims you make have to be supported. So right, yeah. So I don't know where did you find that? Where did you find that information at?
Yes. Yeah, I know.
Okay.
For some things I forgot to source
Okay.
my
So let
information
me just
properly.
remind myself what I wrote here. Yeah, I guess another concern is I only see information used and cited from two chapters, although you have Cook referenced on page 13.
Yeah, no, that is correct.
Okay. So make
I'm
sure you have
only
three. Okay, make sure you have three.
Yes, I know.
Okay.
That's very important.
Okay. So so let's then talk about your ideas here.
Yeah.
Of course, one of my objectives is to help you develop further and polish further your wonderful English language skills. It's all very great to make them even better, to the extent that I can. So I make some suggestions, from making mistakes in Iraq, Egypt, Libya, and the present sand warfare in Syria. So that's a fragment. So you're saying Obama looked ineffective, the Democrats looked weak, something that to some other additional part.
Yeah.
So you can choose what you want to, one of these, it's up to you what you want to choose. And let me go back. Okay, so each of these actions go into chaos and giving ISIS potential to grow and prosper. So I guess I'm wondering, since the question is how did overextension, how do you respond to the claim that America being overextended in its international commitments gave rise to Trump and in his victory in 2016, and he probably will run again in 2024. I ask you, so can you explain how the rise of ISIS contributed to Trump's victory over Hillary Clinton when she ran for president?
Yeah. Well, I tried to maybe I've worded it incorrectly, but I tried to explain that basically because of the historical events over the past 2 decades that America clearly focused on, like Iraq, Iran, and mainly the anti-terrorism. I felt like it kind of weakened the focus over on focusing on itself, America itself. And that's actually what I'm trying to explain, but I guess I worded it kind of not that good.
Well, I don't. There's not an easy answer to the
Yeah, it's a pretty hard topic.
And it's interesting. I mean, it's a fascinating topic. It's a topic that I'm trying to think through as well, and I'm trying to work on, and other people are as well. And other people, the way I've been trying to deal with it is that I've been thinking about it in terms of how America's commitments since 1945, since the victory over in World War II, and then the Cold War, led to this American commitment all over the world, these commitments to expand American influence because of America's fear that the Soviet Union was a Russian version of Nazi Germany, just to put it in one simple, short statement. And this meant, but of course now we have nuclear weapons. We've had, America had it in 45, and then the Soviet Union detonated their first nuclear bomb in 1949. And now, so there is more of a focus on indirect competition between great powers because they can't go to war like they did up until 1940. They can't do that anymore because it could lead to the end of human civilization. I mean, even though, of course, Germany and Japan do not have nuclear weapons, if they wanted to, they could make them by Friday, right? If they wanted to, Japan and Germany could build them tomorrow, okay? And so that means that the Soviet Union and the United States, during the Cold War had to focus on attracting and influencing you and everybody else around the world in ways that didn't rely upon the fist, but relied upon you by either buying you, giving you money or wealth, or offering you ways by which to achieve your other needs, like including, if you're a newly independent country, independence and freedom from Belgian imperialism in the Congo, or French imperialism, or British imperialism, or American imperialism, or Russian imperialism. I mean, I know you said your background is Belarusian, so
Ukrainian.
Oh, Ukrainian. So I don't know which part of Ukraine your family comes from, right? I mean, are they come from the east or the western part of Ukraine?
Mainly, I would say Western. As of my
Oh,
dad, he's from Kiev. So
okay. Is he? He's not. He's not. I mean, I went to Lviv for a conference 5 years ago, and it was really
Lviv, yeah,
fascinating. And
yeah,
of course, there's the Ukrainian Catholic University, and that area, that city, is considered to be like the heartland of intense Ukrainian nationalism. And of
yes,
course, the Russians play with that. Those people are banderistas. Oh, they're going to, all the scary words that Putin likes
yeah,
to use. But national self-determination is a need.
yes,
And so and offering benefits to people, including opening up your Americas to imports from other countries, was important to develop those countries and America's allies, and make them strong and supporters of the United States through economic, military aid, including immigration, allowing people to come from different parts of the world to the United States, because of course during the Cold War, the Soviet Union and the United States are competing with their propaganda, with their misinformation or disinformation or real information. And the Soviet Union is saying, look at that American system. Look how those Americans treat their black people. Look how they treat Hispanic people. Look what they've done to the indigenous Americans. Look how it's a racist, imperialist society because capitalism is inherently based upon racist imperialism. And so that had an effect. And because the communists were claiming we solved the problem of racism in the Soviet Union. We saw Fidel Castro in Cuba, he said, we solved the problem of racism in Cuba. And, there's racism against African people throughout the world, including in Cuba. And I was just listening this morning to a radio broadcast from Democracy Now! And talking about how when the United States invaded Panama in 1989, when Colin Powell, who just died, was in the government. Most of the people, we don't really know how many people died. Most people that died in Panama were African Panamanians, because they were the ones that supported Manuel Noriega. Because Panama is dominated by much of Latin America, a white European descended elite that view themselves as Europeans. Like in Brazil, right, or in Chile, and you look at those people. They could be directly from Madrid or Lisbon. They don't look like. Even Mexico. The presidents of Mexico always look like they're straight out of Madrid, right? They don't. They see a lot of people that have Indian features, but never the president of Mexico. And but Castro claimed that his revolution got rid of their intense racism in Cuba, and so the Americans, that meant you had to try to appeal to a diverse world, so you had to be open to globalization, open to diversification, and a lot of people benefit from that. You benefit from that. I benefit from that. Like you, for example, you speak how many different languages? You speak English. You're from Belgium, right? So you speak
English,
Flemish or
Dutch.
French? You do? How many different languages do you speak?
English, Dutch, French. I used to kind of speak it. I haven't used it in a while, but I understand it. I've learned Spanish the last 2 years, and I'm very fluent in Russian because I
Yeah.
grew up with it. So
the world is your oyster.
yeah,
Globalization is great. You're going to get a college degree. Here you're studying Korea, so you're learning Korean too. But there is this other elements of American society that react very negatively to this globalization, because it's not only because of economics, what they're losing and if you want to live a lifestyle, a material lifestyle that's comparable to what you see on television, and that's what that's what it gets down to. What do people see on their entertainment shows? And you say, why can't I afford that nice house, that nice apartment? If you want to afford nice things, you've got to have a college degree in U.S. Not to mention, I mean, that's at a minimum. You've got to have a 4-year degree, right? Unless you're very lucky, you're going to be working at McDonald's or Walmart, right?
Really?
Well, yeah. And you don't
That's
get a
considered
lot of
lucky.
money in the United States if you do those service jobs. And that is a consequence partly of America's globalization. And America wanted to encourage its allies to develop economically. That meant exporting capital, opening up markets to their imports from those countries, and also allowing more and more people to come to the United States. So American immigration law was very racist. It was established, I think, in the 1920s. Well, even before. I mean, there were limits put on Asian immigrants in the end of the 19th century. In the 1920s, more limits were put on immigration from non-Northern European countries. So it became more, and that was only changed in the 1960s. And that was changed in the context of the Cold War. Right? That this competition the United States was having with the Soviet Union. Now, of course, the Cold War ended 30 years ago, right? Yeah. So you say, well, that's a long time ago. I mean, but still, I mean, you have those economic vested interests in global. I mean, so many companies invested in China as when Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger reestablished formal diplomatic relations with China. They encouraged American companies to go there. And so those companies, I remember when, Coca-Cola and first went there because, Coca-Cola is like the first country to go anywhere, right? Because I don't know why. I mean, even like in Bulgaria, when I spent all that time in Bulgaria from 1994 to 2009, I saw these Coca-Cola signs everywhere. I mean, that's like.
I actually studied or like kind of did research about it. And basically what Coca-Cola is trying to do is having the cultural, don't know 100% how to explain this, but like they're basically trying to culturally be correct in each country and market towards the people who live there. Therefore, they want to be the first ones there to show that they're very global. They're like pro everybody, and they're willing to adapt to each culture so they can market towards basically global.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I was in Bulgaria when the first McDonald's opened in Bulgaria, and it was like, oh wow, a McDonald's. And those companies are very concerned about maintaining certain standards of quality. So it was like real McDonald's food, and it was considered to be in Bulgaria high class dining. Like if you went to McDonald's, because this is a poor country. I mean, this is a post-communist country that was recovering from this collapse of communism. If you could, I mean, the new emerging middle class would go to McDonald's. And that's true in other parts of the world as well. But I think to get to the point I was trying to make in terms of what overextension means, overextension, it manifests itself when there's intense internal polarization within a country in response to globalization. That when more and more groups of people within America hate each other because, working class white American men, they see the world changing and they see that they can't get good jobs unless they go to college, and people that can speak more than one language. Well, I mean, they're doing great, right? If you can speak Spanish and English and speak it well, or French and English and speak French well, I mean, you have so many opportunities, and they feel that the American political establishment and the society doesn't respect them. That America's for Americans, and we know what an American is. And it's not somebody who comes from Nigeria. It's not somebody, maybe we'll tolerate Europeans because they're white, but and there's an element of racism in this, right? That people coming from Asia, Asians are not Americans. That's the nasty racist stereotypical assumption. And since the 1960s, with the change of American immigration laws under Lyndon Johnson, Asian Americans are the fastest growing minority group in the United States. I mean, they're like 5% of the population. When they were just 30 years ago, they were nothing, basically, very, very small. And so the reason why this is important, because if the U.S., one of the reasons why it's important, I think, is because, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, is that in this competition with China, this is the Chinese Communist Party's justification for their political model, that they censor the internet, they censor social media so that you don't have the intense polarization that you see emerging in the United States and to some lesser extent in Europe around quote unquote free speech. When that free speech includes spreading lies and misinformation about the vaccines, about the Jewish Freemason conspiracy, about all of the bullshit that you see being circulated by people on Facebook and Twitter through sharing, and that results in these crazy polarization of people seeing conspiracies and threats. And that undermines the ability of a government to act, supposedly. And the Chinese model, they say, well, you know, we don't want that. We don't want to see somebody like Trump come to power. I mean, that polarization and anger and hostility led to Trump. And he still controls the Republican Party, right? I mean, and so what do you think? Do you think the Chinese model in this world where, you know, basic globalization, interdependence, it's not, you can't deny it. It's a fact. It's just a matter of whether or not you see it or not. We've always been interdependent. Now it's in our face, right? When you see about, for example, how people are saying, you know, COVID-19 problem is not going to go away until it's solved everywhere, until everybody everywhere is vaccinated. You know, if you have this virus circulating in Africa, it's going to mutate. You're going to get more variants, and you're going to have, and so I mean and there's some people who respond with hostility, stereotyping, in-group formation against out-groups, looking for conspiracies to explain why, you know, all of a sudden we've got this COVID-19 crisis that's changing the way we have to live. So, I mean, do you think that basically that the Chinese have an advantage in this era of increasing globalization, climate change, and, you know, that's not going to be solved unless there's global cooperation on that, right? You know, there's got to be cooperation between Beijing, Washington, Moscow, Brussels. You know, but do you think that the Beijing model is better equipped to keep that polarization, and therefore it's going to give China an advantage as we go in further into the 21st century? That China's authoritarian vanguard of the proletariat, you know, that's the justification of the Communist Party, right? You need a vanguard, a leadership. In other words, vanguard is a romantic term for leader, right? A vanguard of the people, you know, consisting of, you know, great people who will take care of everyone, including how they think and how they behave. Because, you know, let's face it, most people don't understand what the problems that we face in this world, right?
Indeed.
So do you think that the Chinese are going to have a power advantage over the United States in this era of increasing global crises?
I think to a certain extent, yes.
I mean, that's what they're claiming. I mean, of course, they have a vested interest in that, because if you're a politician who joins the Chinese Communist Party, you know, you've invested your entire career, your entire identity. You say, yeah, the Chinese models, unless you're a very unusual person, but most people are not unusual. So if they get a job, they get a career, they invest themselves, their identities, their hearts, their paycheck into that organization, they're going to think that organization is very important and very good. Whether it's the Communist Party of China or the military of the United States, or it's the Exxon Mobil Corporation or General Motors, whatever organization we join, we're going to think that organization does a good thing in this world. It's necessary and appropriate. So of course you're going to, you know, the Chinese Communist Party, that's the argument they make, right? That they claim that in the past, you know, when China was open, what did that open mean? It meant that the British and the Germans and the Japanese and the Russians used their spies and traders within China to try to divide and conquer China, to do to China what they did to the Arabs in the Middle East. right? Divide them up into little states, you know, they continue to use that same kind of language. China's all about anti-imperialism.
Yeah.
And therefore they should appeal to the peoples of Africa and Asia and Latin America that are coming out of imperialism or post-colonial societies in terms of addressing the problems these countries face when, you know, they're still really poor. They want to develop, and now they have to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, and now they have to deal with global warming and the intensifying disasters that come from that, with flooding and more intense hurricanes and typhoons and droughts. Who's got the best model to help Philippines develop? The American model or the Chinese model? And the Filipinos are struggling with this. So under Duterte, for example, in the Philippines, they're making more and more, they're trying to balance. So they have American military advisors, they're fighting the Islamist militants in the South. But at the same time, Duterte in the Philippines is very careful not to make China angry. So like, they're not really pushing too hard on China in terms of China's claim to the South China Sea. And I think it's because they think that, you know, America is not going to save them. It's not going to, I mean, Philippines has to work with China, and I think that I mean, for example, until the pandemic, China was by far the biggest investor in Africa, more so than the Americans, more so than the British or the French. China was the biggest investor in Africa, right? And these post-colonial countries in Africa, with their borders drawn by the British and the French and the Portuguese and the Spanish and the Belgians and the Germans and the Italians, with these funky borders, you know, and these people have social media. They know how poor they are. They know how desperate they are. They're trying to get to Europe. They're trying to get to Belgium and the rest of Europe, hundreds of thousands every year. So who's got the best model for developing those countries? The democratic model that the Americans promote, or the Chinese model? And the Chinese are saying, we got the model for you. And the Americans, during the Cold War, the Americans, you know, they would accept military dictatorships in South Korea or Philippines or Chile if they thought that those military dictatorships were necessary to keep the communists out of power in those countries.
Yes.
But now, you know, the Chinese have shown you can be communist and you can be capitalist at the same time, and you can develop your country like we did in China. I mean, I remember when China started its economic reforms in the 1970s, it was a desperately poor place. When I was in high school, just a few years older than you, they started. And then in 40 years, they're the second biggest economy in the world. I mean, 40 years is nothing.
Well, it was a spiraling domino effect, if you could say, because the main contributor to China's success was the US.
Yeah. During the Cold War, America basically allied with China against the Soviet Union, particularly when Nixon and then Carter moved towards basically, and they did exploit that, and that continued until Trump.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But, you know, again, I keep listening to the media every day, and they just keep it. There's not really a conflict between the Republicans and the Democrats in the United States over China. They all see China as a threat. China is a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's one way by which you can overcome the internal polarization and conflicts between Americans, is by finding a common enemy. A common scapegoat enemy, the Soviet Union, oh my God, or the terrorists, Islamic, or now it's China. And China's a real challenge because now the Islamists, I mean, they're so divided and so polarized. The entire economy of Iran is about half the US Defense Department budget.
Whoa.
So how can you make Iran a big evil empire? You can't. It's 80 million people. A whole economy is about half the size of the US Defense Department budget. So how scary is that? I mean, China, though, that's a convenient enemy. If you want to win elections by getting people to like you because you're bringing Americans together against. So that's what I've been working on. and of course, again, it's not just the Americans who do that. I mean, the Chinese are all about foreign enemies. The Chinese Communist Party is all about foreign enemies wanting to, weaken China. So, the international business people, I mean, they don't make much noise, but they're really powerful and influential because, as I said, there's hundreds of billions of dollars that American companies have invested in China. And so, but those people, those business people, they're influential, but they're quiet. They don't protest. They don't go on the street. They don't make fiery speeches. They make business plans.
There's a reason for that, because they invested their own resources.
Yeah.
They're trying to kind of protect their investment in a way.
And I wouldn't talk about all business people, because there are business people that supply the U.S. military that like to look for enemies too, because then they make more money by making military products to sell to the U.S. Army, to the U.S. military. But yeah, I mean, will that be able to counteract American nationalism and Chinese nationalism and Russian nationalism? Maybe, but we don't want to overestimate the importance of money in international relations. It's very, very important. But people don't fight and die and kill for money. They fight and die and kill for the independence and glory of their nation.
Yes.
So, do you have any questions?
No, I think you've definitely kind of helped guidelining into what I've should.
Okay, so later when I'm done with the meetings, I will send you the link to the recording of this session.
Thank you.
So if you're interested in it, and in the meantime, I made some slight changes to your file there, so I can go ahead and just send that to you again, even though I didn't really do anything different to that. But let me see if I can find it here. There it is. Okay. And send. And okay, then that's it for now. And I'll see you next week.
All right.